In the dead of space, where silence reigned supreme, Captain Marko Ivanov floated among the remnants of civilizations that no longer whispered across the cosmos. His ship, the Vanguard, glided through the asteroid belt of Arcturus Minor, a graveyard of planets that each bore the scars of an ancient cataclysm. Marko peered through the viewport, his eyes tracing the curve of a shattered planetoid below. It was here, amid these cosmic ruins, that he'd found it. The cryptic message etched into the debris, unchanged despite the eons. Every ruined world seemed to carry the same ominous warning. Beware the guardians of Earth. The bridge of the Vanguard was bathed in the blue glow of starlight filtering through the asteroids. Marko turned from the viewport to face his navigation officer, who was busy adjusting the trajectory to avoid a particularly jagged chunk of rock. "Adjust the heading. 2 degrees starboard," Marko instructed, his voice steady. The navigator nodded and the ship responded with a smooth arc, the stars tilting slightly in the viewport. As they maneuvered, Marko couldn't shake the chill that ran down his spine every time he read those warnings. What was it about Earth? A planet famed in ancient lore not for its beauty or resources, but as a harbinger of something far more dire. "Captain, we're approaching the next coordinate," the navigator announced, breaking Marko's contemplation. "The scanners have picked up something unusual." Marko approached the main console, his reflection faint against the screens. The data displayed was clear, an anomaly unlike any they had cataloged before, located on the next shattered world in their path. "Let's take a closer look, but keep our distance," Marko decided, his curiosity piqued but tempered by caution. The Vanguard edged closer, sensors deployed to their fullest as they scanned the anomaly. The readings flickered on the screen, indecipherable at first, then slowly cohering into a discernible pattern. It was a vault, sealed and intact despite the surrounding devastation. Marko's pulse quickened. Vaults like these often contained relics or knowledge left behind by the ancients, secrets of their rise and fall. "Prepare the extraction drones," Marko ordered, his gaze fixed on the vault. The side characters on the bridge moved efficiently, their actions a quiet testament to the ship's preparedness for situations just like this. As the drones deployed, Marko felt the weight of history upon him. He was about to open a door that had remained closed for millennia, possibly uncovering the reasons behind the mysterious warnings and perhaps the feared guardians of Earth themselves. The drone sent back its first images, the vault door heavy and adorned with symbols that glowed faintly under the drone's lights. Each symbol was a puzzle piece in the vast galaxy's history, and Marko was determined to piece it together. "Whatever we find, it changes nothing," Marko spoke to his crew, his voice resolute. "We face it together, and we learn. That's what we're here for." The vault began to open, a hiss escaping as the seal broke, revealing darkness within. Marko watched, breath held, as light spilled into the ancient chamber, inching closer to the truths that lay hidden in the shadows. As the vault door creaked open, a blast of cold air brushed against Marko's face, carrying the faint, musty aroma of decay and forgotten epochs. Inside, the chamber was larger than expected, stretching into a cavernous space lined with artifacts and alien inscriptions glowing dimly in the drone's floodlights. "Visuals coming in now, Captain," the communications officer relayed, his voice laced with a mix of awe and caution. The bridge crew leaned in, their eyes fixed on the main screen displaying the chamber's contents. Marko scrutinized every detail. Among the relics, a central pedestal caught his attention, its surface dust-free unlike the rest. Atop it lay a metallic orb, its exterior engraved with intricate patterns that pulsed softly with a pale blue light. "Is that writing?" the science officer mused aloud, squinting at the images. "Looks like a form of pictographic script." "Enhance that section," Marko commanded, pointing to the orb. The image zoomed in, revealing that the symbols were not just decorative but formed a narrative. "Translate it," he added, his voice steady yet filled with anticipation. The linguistics specialist worked quickly, his fingers dancing over the keyboard. "It's a historical record, possibly a warning," he explained, his brow furrowed as the text took shape on the screen. It speaks of Earth's guardians, beings of immense power awakened only by dire threat. The bridge was silent, the crew absorbing the implications. The air felt charged, every blink and breath magnified in the stillness. "Captain, there's more," the specialist continued, his voice a whisper now. "It mentions a key, something capable of unleashing or binding these guardians. And it's located on Earth." Marko's mind raced. This was the connection he had been seeking, the thread that linked all those dead civilizations to Earth. He needed to see this key for himself, to understand its true nature and purpose. "Prepare for a course to Earth," Marko decided, his decision resolute. "We need to secure that key before anyone else does." The navigator nodded, inputting coordinates with precision. As the Vanguard adjusted its course, the stars outside seemed to align with their new path, a celestial map drawn towards an ancient mystery. Below deck, the engines thrummed softly, propelling them forward. The sensation of movement was subtle yet undeniable, the ship responding with eager compliance to its captain's will. Marko returned his gaze to the screen, where the last images of the alien chamber were being recorded. "Keep a constant feed on that chamber. Anything changes, I want to know immediately," he instructed, his command cutting through the quiet like a knife. As the Vanguard sailed through the star-studded blackness, Marko felt a mix of dread and excitement. Earth was a beacon in the vast universe, a keeper of secrets that many had sought but none had survived to reveal. What were these guardians, protectors or destroyers? And the key, was it a tool of salvation or a harbinger of doom? His thoughts were a whirlwind, but his resolve was clear. This journey was not just a mission. It was a quest for truth, a pilgrimage to the heart of an age-old enigma that had haunted the galaxy for millennia. The answers lay ahead, on the blue jewel of Earth, waiting to be uncovered. As the Vanguard carved its path through the cosmos, Captain Marko Ivanov stood at the helm, his eyes reflecting the nebulized dance outside the viewport. The journey to Earth was not just a trek across space, but a dive into the unknown depths of ancient lore and galactic mysteries. The ship's mess hall buzzed with the low murmur of the crew sharing their speculations over dinner. The clink of utensils and the rustle of nutrient packets provided a backdrop to their theories, each as colorful and varied as the space vistas outside. "Imagine what this key could be," mused Lieutenant Harrow, his fork pausing midair. "A weapon, perhaps? Or maybe some kind of cosmic artifact?" Marko entered, his presence quiet but palpable, like a shadow passing over the sun. The chatter dimmed as the crew turned their attention to him, awaiting guidance or reassurance. He nodded, acknowledging their curiosity, without stoking the flames of their fears. "We are not grave robbers or treasure hunters," Marko said, his voice firm, slicing through the fog of conjecture. "Our mission is to understand, to prevent history from repeating its darkest days. Whatever lies on Earth, it is not for us to wield, but to safeguard." His words settled over the crew, a gentle but firm reminder of their purpose. They returned to their meals with a renewed sense of duty, their conversations now tinged with a sober respect for the task ahead. In the quiet of the ship's library, Marko pored over ancient texts and star maps, the soft glow of the screen illuminating his focused expression. Each document was a piece of the puzzle, and he was the weaver trying to stitch them into a coherent tapestry. "Captain, you should see this!" called out Dr. Amin, the ship's historian, from across the room. He gestured to a holographic display where a series of symbols mirrored those they had seen in the alien vault. Marko approached, peering at the configuration. "It's a star chart," he realized, the constellations aligning with sectors known for their archaeological wealth. "And there, see that cluster? It's not random. It's a map leading straight to Earth." The revelation was a gust of wind, blowing open the doors to a path that had remained hidden in plain sight. The chart didn't just mark Earth as a location, but as a nexus of cosmic significance, a beacon that had called silently through the ages. Marko's sleep was restless that night, his dreams haunted by visions of guardians standing watch over sleeping horrors, their faces stoic yet sorrowful. The stars whispered secrets in a language of light and shadow, each flicker a heartbeat, each pause a breath held in anticipation. Morning found the Vanguard approaching the outer rim of Earth's solar system. The planet appeared on the main screen, blue and swirling with white clouds, deceptively peaceful from afar. "We are entering uncharted waters," Marko announced over the ship's comm system as they prepared to cross the threshold into Earth's domain. "Stay sharp, trust in your training, and keep your minds as open as your eyes." The Vanguard sliced through the silence of space, its crew a tapestry of hope and trepidation. Earth hung before them, a jewel wrapped in enigma, its secrets veiled by beauty, and a dark past that whispered warnings through the void. Marko felt the weight of their forebears' fears and hopes resting on his shoulders, a mantle he bore with a solemn resolve to uncover the truth, however stark or startling it might be. As the Vanguard pierced the boundary of Earth's orbital space, an eerie quiet descended upon the crew, the stars watching like silent witnesses. The blue planet loomed large and vibrant against the void, its oceans a deep cerulean, continents a mosaic of greens and browns. Yet for all its beauty, a shiver of apprehension ran through the ship, the crew's breaths a soft chorus of trepidation. Captain Marko Ivanov stood at the forefront, his gaze locked on Earth, feeling the ancient warnings weigh heavy in the air. "All stations report," he commanded, his voice cutting through the quiet with precision. "Navigation is green. Orbital path is stable," came the crisp response from the navigator, his words crisp in the stillness of the command bridge. "Scanners show no immediate threats, but the atmosphere is thick with anomalies," reported Dr. Amin, his tone tinged with unease. "It's as if the planet itself is hesitant to unveil its secrets." Marko nodded, absorbing the tension that seemed to ripple through the air, the scent of recycled air mingling with a faint underlying aroma of electrical insulation heated by constant use. Familiar, yet subtly foreboding. The Vanguard edged closer, the view of Earth growing ever more detailed. Swirls of white cloud twirled over land, the vast oceans whispering of ages past. As they entered the upper atmosphere, a brilliant aurora greeted them, ribbons of green and purple dancing across the sky, a silent ballet set to the rhythm of the solar wind. "Prepare for atmospheric entry," Marko instructed, his voice steady yet reflective. The crew adjusted their stations, the ship gently vibrating as it met the first layers of Earth's protective embrace. Inside the ship, every surface seemed to hum with anticipation, the temperature dropping as the hull met the cold upper air. Lieutenant Harrow distributed thermal cloaks with a reassuring smile, his movements a familiar routine that brought comfort in the face of the unknown. As they descended, the first signs of what awaited them emerged. Ruins, visible from high above, marked the landscape, ancient structures long swallowed by nature, yet unmistakably artificial, their forms jutting out like bones from the earth. "These were once cities, civilizations," Dr. Amin whispered, almost to himself, his voice a ghost of awe and sadness. "What stories they must hold." The ship settled gently on a verdant plain, near the edge of a crumbling metropolis. The airlock door opened with a hiss, releasing a breath of Earth's air, fresh with the scent of rain-soaked soil and wild flora, a stark contrast to the recycled atmosphere they had breathed for so long. Marko stepped out first, the ground beneath his boots soft yet unyielding. The sound of the wind rustling through the leaves and the distant call of a bird were the only welcomes they received. No fanfare, no immediate threats, just the planet and its palpable history. "Fan out, but stay within visual range," Marko ordered, his eyes scanning the horizon where the ruins beckoned. As the team moved out, each step took them deeper into Earth's mysteries, the air filled with the whispers of the past, beckoning them to uncover what was meant to remain hidden. The ruins awaited, silent and imposing, their shadows long and dark beneath the afternoon sun. Here, amid these forgotten relics, the truth about the Guardians and Earth's ominous warning was hidden, shrouded in the quiet despair of a world that had once thrived. The shadows of the ancient ruins stretched long and twisted as the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting the world in hues of amber and rust. Captain Marko Ivanov and his crew tread softly among the remnants of a civilization that had whispered its last eons ago, each step a silent testament to the mysteries enveloping Earth. The air was thick with the scent of moss and decay, a cool dampness that clung to their skins and filled their lungs with each breath. Earth's untouched wilds encroached upon the broken stones and shattered columns, vines creeping over surfaces that once gleamed with the polish of a bustling city. "Over here," Dr. Amin called, his voice barely above a whisper, yet cutting through the hush of the twilight breeze. He stood at the base of a large, partially collapsed structure, its walls inscribed with the same cryptic symbols they had seen aboard the ship. The engravings glimmered faintly under the light of their portable scanners, secrets just out of reach. Marko approached, his eyes narrowing as he took in the sight. The structure appeared to be a temple or monument, its design intentional and imposing. "These symbols, they are not just decoration. They're narrative," he observed, tracing a finger over the cool stone, feeling the engraving's edges like braille telling stories of forgotten epochs. "Seems they revered whatever was guarded here," Lieutenant Harrow added, scanning the surroundings with his device. "Energy readings are off the charts just beneath us. There's something here, Captain, something big." The air tasted metallic, a tang of iron and electricity that made their skin prickle with anticipation. Marko nodded, signaling the team to prepare for a deeper exploration. They set up floodlights, the beams slicing through the encroaching darkness, painting the ancient stones with stark clarity. As they delved into the heart of the ruins, the ground beneath them thrummed with a dormant power, the silence punctuated only by the distant howl of the wind and their own steady breaths. Every corner held shadows that danced just out of the light's reach, as if the past itself stirred, restless with the presence of intruders. "We need to be cautious," Marko instructed, his voice low. "Whatever these guardians are, they were important enough to unite entire civilizations in caution. We don't want to wake what has been left dormant." The crew moved forward, their lights revealing a path through the ruins that led to an underground chamber. The entrance was framed by two massive statues, their features eroded by time yet still exuding a silent vigilance, guardians in their own right, frozen in eternal watch over the secrets below. Inside, the chamber opened up into a vast cavern, the air cool and heavy with the echo of their steps. The walls were lined with more inscriptions, and in the center, a dais held a single object, a metallic orb, similar to the one they had found in the alien vault, but larger and infused with a pulsing light. "Is that the key?" Dr. Amin murmured, his voice a mix of awe and fear. "It might be," Marko replied, his eyes locked on the glowing object. "Or it's the lock. Either way, our answers are here." The team encircled the dais, their scanners whirring softly, documenting, analyzing. Yet, as they stood there, the light from the orb grew brighter, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat quickening with the thrill of the hunt. Marko felt a shiver run down his spine. The mystery of Earth's guardians was close, so close he could almost touch it. Yet with each pulse of light, he sensed they were stepping deeper into a web that had been spun long before humanity took its first breaths on a distant blue planet. As the pulsing light from the orb intensified, casting eerie, elongated shadows across the cavern walls, Captain Marko Ivanov felt the air thicken, as if charged with a silent, waiting energy. The crew's breaths came in shallow drafts, misting slightly in the coolness of the underground chamber, their eyes fixed on the enigmatic device before them. "Captain, the energy readings are spiking," whispered Lieutenant Harrow, his device emitting a soft glow as it struggled to quantify the unquantifiable. "It's as if the orb is reacting to our presence." Marko nodded slowly, his mind racing with possibilities and dangers. "No one touch anything. We don't know what triggers it might have," he cautioned, his voice barely audible over the low thrum that seemed to emanate from the very stones beneath their feet. Dr. Amin, crouched near the edge of the dais, studied the symbols that surrounded the orb, his brow furrowed in concentration. "These inscriptions speak of a trial, a test to prove worthiness," he murmured, translating the glyphs with hasty precision. It seems we may need to pass some sort of judgment or challenge set by the ancients to access the orb's secrets. The concept of a trial set by a long-extinct civilization sent a ripple of apprehension through the team. The air felt heavier, laden with the dusty scent of antiquity and the sharp tang of fear. Marko stepped closer to the orb, his gaze intent. "We came prepared for anything. Let's prove we are worthy," he declared, his resolve firm. Suddenly, the ground beneath them vibrated slightly, a subtle but unmistakable shift. The orb's light shifted from blue to a deep, pulsating red, casting the cavern into a sinister hue. "It's begun," Marko stated, watching as the inscriptions on the floor lit up, forming a complex pattern that snaked its way around the dais. "Look at the pattern. It's a map," exclaimed Harrow, pointing to the glowing lines that seemed to form a labyrinthine design on the floor. "We need to follow it, step by step. It's a physical manifestation of the trial." Carefully, Marko led the way, his footsteps echoing softly as he stepped onto the glowing path. Each step was measured, the crisp sound of his boots against the cold stone a stark contrast to the silence that enveloped them. The team followed, their movements synchronized, a dance dictated by the ancient lines drawn in light. As they progressed, the air shifted, becoming cooler, the scent of moss and earth intensifying as if the very cave was breathing with them. The light from the orb continued to pulse, now in sync with their steps, a heartbeat driving them forward through the twisting pathways of the trial. Their journey through the labyrinth was fraught with tension, each turn and twist a test of their resolve and trust in the cryptic clues left behind by the civilization that had crafted this challenge. Whispered instructions and soft affirmations passed between them, a lifeline in the maze of uncertainty. Finally, they reached the heart of the labyrinth, where a small pedestal awaited, bathed in a pool of soft, golden light that seemed to offer sanctuary from the oppressive red that still illuminated the rest of the cavern. Atop the pedestal sat a smaller, secondary orb, its surface smooth and unmarked. "This must be the key, or at least part of it," Marko concluded, his voice a mix of awe and wariness. "It seems we have passed the first test." But as they stood there, the larger orb flickered abruptly, its light extinguishing, plunging them into darkness, save for the faint golden glow from the small orb. A silence descended, profound and heavy, as if the cavern itself held its breath, waiting for what was to come next. In the sudden darkness, the small orb's golden glow seemed almost ethereal, casting long shadows across the cavern walls. The crew's eyes adjusted slowly, the stark change in illumination drawing a sharp breath from each member. They huddled close, the air around them cool and still, laden with the earthy scent of untouched ancient chambers that hinted at secrets long buried. Captain Marko Ivanov stepped forward, his figure outlined by the dim light. "Secure the area," he instructed quietly, his voice resonating softly against the stone. "We don't know what triggered the blackout, nor what it signifies." Dr. Amin, his eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and caution, approached the pedestal carefully. "This might be a protective measure or perhaps a part of the trial. The ancients were known for their puzzles and layers of security," he suggested, his hands hovering over the smaller orb without touching it. Lieutenant Harrow knelt, examining the ground where the labyrinth pattern had been illuminated moments before. "The path we walked, it's gone," he observed, his fingers brushing over the cool, smooth stones now devoid of any light. "Whatever we did, we're meant to proceed from here without guidance." The silence that followed was palpable, broken only by the faint drip of condensation from the cavern's ceiling, the droplets echoing like whispers in a hushed conversation. The air tasted slightly metallic, the result of mineral-rich water filtering through the limestone above. Marko approached the pedestal, his gaze locked on the orb. "We need to understand this is not just a lock or key. It's a testament to the civilization that left it behind," he mused aloud, his words floating in the cool air. What were they protecting, or warning us against? As if in response, the orb began to pulse with a soft, rhythmic light, its glow warm and inviting, yet underscored by an undefinable tension. The crew watched in rapt attention, their bodies tensed for any consequence. "Record everything," Marko ordered, his voice steady. Dr. Amin nodded, activating a small handheld device that began to whir silently, capturing the scene in high definition. The orb's pulsing grew more pronounced, the intervals between light and dark shortening as if building to a crescendo. Suddenly, with a soft click, the orb opened, unfolding like a flower at dawn. Inside lay a crystal, clear and flawless, nestled within the metallic petals. This could be the heart of their technology, or their power," Harrow whispered, his voice filled with wonder. Dr. Amin reached out slowly, and with Marko's nod, lifted the crystal. It was surprisingly lightweight, cool to the touch, and vibrated faintly, as if alive with energy. The moment the crystal was removed, a low rumble shook the cavern. Dust motes danced in the beam of their flashlights, and a faint breeze stirred, carrying a new scent, a mixture of ozone and something sweet and tangy, like overripe fruit. "We need to move," Marko decided, urgency clear in his tone. "This chamber won't stay stable if we alter its contents too much." Dr. Amin, his eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and caution, approached the pedestal carefully. "This might be a protective measure or perhaps a part of the trial. The ancients were known for their puzzles and layers of security," he suggested, his hands hovering over the smaller orb without touching it. Lieutenant Harrow knelt, examining the ground where the labyrinth pattern had been illuminated moments before. "The path we walked, it's gone," he observed, his fingers brushing over the cool, smooth stones now devoid of any light. "Whatever we did, we're meant to proceed from here without guidance." The silence that followed was palpable, broken only by the faint drip of condensation from the cavern's ceiling, the droplets echoing like whispers in a hushed conversation. The air tasted slightly metallic, the result of mineral-rich water filtering through the limestone above. Marko approached the pedestal, his gaze locked on the orb. "We need to understand this is not just a lock or key. It's a testament to the civilization that left it behind," he mused aloud, his words floating in the cool air. "What were they protecting, or warning us against?" As if in response, the orb began to pulse with a soft, rhythmic light, its glow warm and inviting, yet underscored by an undefinable tension. The crew watched in rapt attention, their bodies tensed for any consequence. "Record everything," Marko ordered, his voice steady. Dr. Amin nodded, activating a small handheld device that began to whir silently, capturing the scene in high definition. The orb's pulsing grew more pronounced, the intervals between light and dark shortening as if building to a crescendo. Suddenly, with a soft click, the orb opened, unfolding like a flower at dawn. Inside lay a crystal, clear and flawless, nestled within the metallic petals. This could be the heart of their technology, or their power," Harrow whispered, his voice filled with wonder. Dr. Amin reached out slowly, and with Marko's nod, lifted the crystal. It was surprisingly lightweight, cool to the touch, and vibrated faintly, as if alive with energy. The moment the crystal was removed, a low rumble shook the cavern. Dust motes danced in the beam of their flashlights, and a faint breeze stirred, carrying a new scent, a mixture of ozone and something sweet and tangy, like overripe fruit. "We need to move," Marko decided, urgency clear in his tone. "This chamber won't stay stable if we alter its contents too much." As they retraced their steps, the walls of the cavern seemed to close in, the shadows growing deeper and more menacing. The crystal in Dr. Amin's hand glowed steadily, a beacon as they navigated back through the darkness, its light casting everything in a stark new perspective. Each step was a calculated risk, the weight of their discovery a heavy presence in their minds. They were pioneers on the threshold of a new understanding, walking a tightrope between enlightenment and oblivion. Emerging from the cavern's claustrophobic embrace, Captain Marko Ivanov and his team were greeted by the crisp night air of Earth, a stark contrast to the stale, underground atmosphere they had left behind. The sky was a tapestry of stars, each one a silent observer to the drama unfolding on the planet's surface. The crew paused, allowing their eyes and lungs to adjust to the openness and the faint scent of pine carried on a gentle breeze. Dr. Amin, holding the crystal securely, looked up at the celestial display. "It's as if the entire galaxy is watching, waiting to see what we do next," he said, his voice tinged with a mix of reverence and apprehension. Marko nodded, feeling the weight of their discovery. "They just might be," he replied solemnly. "Let's set up camp here for the night. We need to analyze the crystal's properties and plan our next move carefully." The team set about their tasks with practiced efficiency, setting up portable lights that cast soft pools of illumination on the forest floor, starkly outlining the trees and underbrush. The campsite soon resembled a small island of light in a dark, encroaching sea. Lieutenant Harrow, tasked with security, patrolled the perimeter, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of needles beneath his boots. His sharp eyes scanned the shadows, alert to any movement. "All quiet," he reported upon returning, his voice low but clear. "But keep your communicators on. We're not the only creatures out here." Around the central workstation, the science team, led by Dr. Amin, began a detailed examination of the crystal. It was placed within a containment field that shimmered faintly, distorting the air around it with heat waves, making the crystal appear as though it was underwater. As Amin adjusted the settings on his scanner, the crystal pulsed lightly, emitting a series of soft tones that harmonized oddly with the nocturnal chorus of the forest. "It's resonating with something," Amin murmured, fascinated. "These aren't random emissions. They're almost communicative." Marko leaned over the scientist's shoulder to watch the readings change. Could it be responding to its environment, or perhaps to something else out here? He pondered aloud, his brow furrowed in thought. The analysis yielded more questions than answers. The crystal's structure was unlike anything they had cataloged before. Complex molecular chains formed patterns that suggested artificial engineering, yet they harbored an unmistakable organic quality. As the night deepened, a sense of unease settled over the camp. The darkness seemed thicker, and the sounds of the forest grew more pronounced. The rustle of leaves, the distant call of a night bird, and the occasional crack of a branch. Suddenly, the crystal's glow intensified, casting stark, dancing shadows around the workstation. A chill swept through the camp, as if a cold front had descended upon them. "Something's coming," Harrow announced, his hand on his sidearm, his eyes scanning the tree line illuminated by the crystal's growing light. The team rallied, gathering around the workstation as a figure approached from the darkness. It was human, or so it seemed, moving with a deliberate grace that belied an otherworldly nature. The figure stopped just at the edge of the light, its features obscured by shadow. "I am the Guardian," it declared, its voice neither male nor female but resonant with an ageless timbre. "You hold what was kept from the unworthy. What are your intentions, children of Earth?" The crew stood silent, the mystery of the Earth's guardians now personified before them, as tangible as the crystal that pulsed between them. In the chilling stillness of the night, as the mysterious figure declared itself the Guardian, a breeze stirred, carrying a whisper of foreboding through the trees. Captain Marko Ivanov stepped forward, his posture resolute, facing the silhouette that seemed both part of the darkness and apart from it. "We seek understanding, not conquest," Marko stated clearly, his voice firm, betraying no hint of the tension that gripped him. The Guardian remained motionless, a shadow against the shifting backdrop of the forest, where the light from the crystal painted ghostly figures on the trunks of the trees. "Understanding comes with a price," the Guardian replied, its voice echoing slightly as if bouncing off distant walls. "Many have sought what you hold, driven by greed or desperation. Few have understood its true purpose." Behind Marko, Dr. Amin held the crystal aloft, its light casting prismatic colors onto his face, reflecting his mixed emotions, curiosity battling with a rising dread. "What is its purpose?" he asked, unable to contain his scientific thirst for knowledge. The Guardian took a step into the light, its features becoming clearer. It appeared human, but with an agelessness that spoke of centuries. Its eyes, deep and dark, seemed to hold the night within them. "It is a key," it said, pausing as if weighing the information it was about to divulge. A key to the vault of time, containing power that can alter the course of history, rewrite the fabric of reality. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of the Guardian's words settling over them like a heavy cloak. Lieutenant Harrow subtly adjusted his stance, his hand near his weapon, not out of aggression, but as a primal reaction to the unknown. The vault must remain sealed, the Guardian continued, its gaze sweeping over them, piercing and discerning. It was sealed for a reason, to prevent the chaos that its power can unleash. You must decide whether to protect this secret or risk everything for the sake of curiosity. Marko felt the chill of the night seep deeper into his bones. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, the only sounds the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl. The crystal's glow intensified, throbbing in sync with his racing heart. "We will guard it," Marko finally declared, understanding the enormity of his promise. "We will ensure its safety, not just for us, but for all who come after." The Guardian nodded slowly, its form beginning to fade into the mist that had begun to rise around them. "Be wise, children of Earth. Many eyes watch you now, some filled with hope, others with envy and malice." As the figure disappeared completely, the crystal dimmed, its light retreating as if in approval of the decision made. The crew stood silently, each member processing the encounter, the forest's earlier foreboding now replaced with a guarded peace. Returning to their camp, they packed up their equipment, the crystal now secured in a containment unit designed to shield its energy. As they prepared to leave the forest, the first light of dawn began to break, casting long shadows and promising a new day. The team rallied, gathering around the workstation as a figure approached from the darkness. It was human, or so it seemed, moving with a deliberate grace that belied an otherworldly nature. The figure stopped just at the edge of the light, its features obscured by shadow. "I am the Guardian," it declared, its voice neither male nor female but resonant with an ageless timbre. "You hold what was kept from the unworthy. What are your intentions, children of Earth?" The crew stood silent, the mystery of the Earth's guardians now personified before them, as tangible as the crystal that pulsed between them. In the chilling stillness of the night, as the mysterious figure declared itself the Guardian, a breeze stirred, carrying a whisper of foreboding through the trees. Captain Marko Ivanov stepped forward, his posture resolute, facing the silhouette that seemed both part of the darkness and apart from it. "We seek understanding, not conquest," Marko stated clearly, his voice firm, betraying no hint of the tension that gripped him. The Guardian remained motionless, a shadow against the shifting backdrop of the forest, where the light from the crystal painted ghostly figures on the trunks of the trees. "Understanding comes with a price," the Guardian replied, its voice echoing slightly as if bouncing off distant walls. "Many have sought what you hold, driven by greed or desperation. Few have understood its true purpose." Behind Marko, Dr. Amin held the crystal aloft, its light casting prismatic colors onto his face, reflecting his mixed emotions, curiosity battling with a rising dread. "What is its purpose?" he asked, unable to contain his scientific thirst for knowledge. The Guardian took a step into the light, its features becoming clearer. It appeared human, but with an agelessness that spoke of centuries. Its eyes, deep and dark, seemed to hold the night within them. "It is a key," it said, pausing as if weighing the information it was about to divulge. "A key to the vault of time, containing power that can alter the course of history, rewrite the fabric of reality." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of the Guardian's words settling over them like a heavy cloak. Lieutenant Harrow subtly adjusted his stance, his hand near his weapon, not out of aggression, but as a primal reaction to the unknown. "The vault must remain sealed," the Guardian continued, its gaze sweeping over them, piercing and discerning. "It was sealed for a reason, to prevent the chaos that its power can unleash. You must decide whether to protect this secret or risk everything for the sake of curiosity." Marko felt the chill of the night seep deeper into his bones. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, the only sounds the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl. The crystal's glow intensified, throbbing in sync with his racing heart. "We will guard it," Marko finally declared, understanding the enormity of his promise. "We will ensure its safety, not just for us, but for all who come after." The Guardian nodded slowly, its form beginning to fade into the mist that had begun to rise around them. "Be wise, children of Earth. Many eyes watch you now, some filled with hope, others with envy and malice." As the figure disappeared completely, the crystal dimmed, its light retreating as if in approval of the decision made. The crew stood silently, each member processing the encounter, the forest's earlier foreboding now replaced with a guarded peace. Returning to their camp, they packed up their equipment, the crystal now secured in a containment unit designed to shield its energy. As they prepared to leave the forest, the first light of dawn began to break, casting long shadows and promising a new day. The crew moved into action, the quiet of the forest now a distant memory, as they prepared to face whatever consequences their actions had wrought. The mystery of the crystal deepened, pulling them further into the web of ancient secrets that spanned beyond the confines of time and space. As the vanguard prepared for departure, the weight of their discovery pressed against the crew like an unseen force. The forest, once tranquil in the morning light, now felt like an ancient spectator, its towering trees whispering in the breeze as if discussing the fate of those who had dared to unearth forbidden knowledge. Marko stood near the containment unit, where the crystal rested, its glow subdued, yet steady. The markings burned into the ground and circled the ship like a silent warning, their meaning clear now. Crossing this boundary had changed everything. Dr. Amin's fingers hovered over his datapad, his eyes flicking between readings with quiet urgency. "Captain, the crystal's energy levels have increased since the markings appeared. It's responding to something, maybe to whatever created them." Marko's gaze lifted to the horizon, where the first sliver of the sun broke through the treetops, gilding the ruins in molten gold. "Or it's being summoned," he murmured. The realization sent a shiver down his spine, colder than the dawn air. A sudden gust swept through the clearing, carrying the scent of damp earth and something metallic, like the charge before a lightning strike. The ship's external sensors crackled to life, detecting movement beyond the tree line. Harrow emerged from the shadows near the ship's ramp, his rifle angled slightly downward but ready. "We're not alone," he confirmed, his voice edged with tension. "Something's watching us." Marko exhaled slowly, steadying himself. "Positions," he ordered, and the crew responded instantly, weapons lowered but poised. He turned to Amin. "Secure the crystal. If anything happens, that comes first." The scientist nodded, his hands tightening around the containment unit as he backed towards the ship. The forest stilled. Even the rustling leaves seemed to hold their breath. Then, from the depths of the trees, a figure emerged. It was not the Guardian they had encountered before. This being moved differently, deliberate yet fluid, as if the air itself parted for its steps. Its form was draped in what appeared to be woven strands of shifting light, refracting the dim morning in patterns that played tricks on the eye. Marko squared his shoulders. "Identify yourself." The figure's voice was smooth, devoid of inflection. "You have disturbed the balance." Amin took a sharp breath. The vault, he realized aloud. It wasn't just a containment field. It was an equilibrium. The being tilted its head, its face obscured by the shimmering fabric that flowed like liquid silver. "You were warned." Marko's grip on his sidearm tightened. "And we chose to understand." The figure lifted a hand, palm facing upward. The air around them pulsed as if space itself trembled in anticipation. "The key is not yours to wield," it declared. "Return it or witness what lies beyond the threshold." Marko exchanged a glance with Amin, the weight of the choice hanging between them. The boundary had been breached, and something was waiting on the other side. The air vibrated with tension, thick as the moment before a storm's first strike. The being stood motionless, its shimmering form catching the early morning light, its voice still hanging in the air like an unbroken note. "Return it, or witness what lies beyond the threshold." Captain Marko Ivanov measured his next words carefully, feeling the weight of unseen eyes pressing against him. "We don't seek power," he said, his voice even but firm, "but we can't return something when we don't yet understand its purpose." The being remained still, its presence warping the space around it, the way heat distorts the air above the desert. "The purpose is not for you to know. It is for you to obey." A breeze swept through the clearing, carrying the scent of damp bark and something unfamiliar, an underlying sharpness that stung the back of the throat. The symbols burned into the earth around the vanguard flickered, as though responding to the energy radiating from the being's presence. Dr. Amin's fingers curled tighter around the containment unit. "If this crystal is a key," he said cautiously, "then that means something has been locked away." The being's head inclined slightly. "And you believe it should be freed?" Silence fell over the clearing. The very implication sent a ripple of unease through the crew. Marko took a step forward, his boots pressing into the softened ground. "That depends on what's behind the lock." The air around the figure wavered, the shifting strands of its form brightening for an instant before settling again. "It is not what is behind it that should concern you," the being said. "It is what has been waiting for it to be opened." A sudden noise cracked through the stillness, like stone splitting under unseen pressure. The ground beneath their feet trembled, not violently, but with the slow certainty of something stirring beneath the surface. Amin's datapad flared with readings, warning signals flashing red across the screen. "Energy levels spiking again. Captain, something is activating." Lieutenant Harrow adjusted his stance, his gaze locked on the surrounding forest. "This isn't just a warning anymore. It's a countdown." Marko exhaled sharply. If this thing is meant to stay locked, why create a key at all? Someone built this. Someone decided it could be opened. The being's voice was devoid of emotion. "Some secrets are not meant to be buried forever, but neither are they meant to be in the wrong hands." The vibrations in the ground deepened. A new sound emerged, faint at first, a distant resonance, like the echo of something vast shifting in the dark. Marko turned to his crew. "We're out of time. We need to decide." The being's form flickered again, the light bending around it like a mirage. "Decide wisely," it warned. "Once the choice is made, there is no turning back." The ground beneath them gave a single deep crack. The crystal in Amin's hands flared, as if awakening. And in the farthest edge of the horizon, the first dark tendrils of something unseen began to rise. The fissure in the earth widened, releasing a slow exhale of warmth, laced with the scent of stone long hidden from the sun. The air itself seemed to ripple, an unnatural distortion spreading outward, stirring the leaves and unsettling the ground beneath their feet. The tendrils at the horizon thickened, writhing like ink spilling through water, a slow, deliberate motion that promised inevitability. Marko assessed the field before them. The vanguard stood as their only exit route, but leaving now was not an option. If they abandoned the crystal here, they would forfeit their only leverage. If they took it, they risked breaking whatever balance had held for millennia. "Options," Marko ordered, keeping his stance firm as he glanced between his officers. Lieutenant Harrow, already analyzing the perimeter, spoke first. "We can fortify a defensive line, use the vanguard's external shielding as a fallback point. But if this thing spreads underground, we lose structural integrity fast. We need a secondary escape plan." Dr. Amin, still gripping the crystal, his fingers whitening with tension, interjected. "We don't even know what we're containing. If this is an energy reaction, it may require a precise frequency to counteract. I need time to analyze the crystal's core structure, see if it's a stabilizer, not just a key." Marko nodded, shifting his focus to the Guardian, who remained motionless, watching. "And what about you?" he demanded. "You want us to return the key. But what if that's not enough? What if this thing doesn't stop?" The Guardian's form shimmered briefly, the air bending around it. "Containment has already failed. The key must return, but so must the seal be reinforced." Marko turned back to his crew. The implications were clear. They weren't just reversing their mistake. They needed to rebuild the lock while ensuring they weren't sealing themselves inside with whatever was awakening beneath them. "Amin, get the crystal's data fed to the ship's computational core," Find out if we can replicate its properties artificially. He turned to Harrow. We need physical barriers. If the terrain is unstable, we use controlled charges to force it in the direction we want. Channel the collapse away from the ship. Harrow nodded, already marking coordinates on his tactical display. We'll have to move fast. If we miscalculate the blast angles, we could be burying ourselves along with it. Marko's gaze flickered toward the creeping tendrils of darkness on the horizon. They had minutes, not hours. We're not sealing a tomb. We're forcing whatever's beneath us into dormancy before it fully breaches. Dr. Amin knelt, his scanner flickering rapidly as he ran diagnostics on the crystal. If it's acting as a frequency lock, we need a counter-frequency to suppress whatever energy field it was containing. His voice was clipped, methodical. I can map it, but I need the ship's harmonic stabilizers repurposed. The Vanguard can project a counterwave. Marko activated his communicator. Harrow, get your men ready. We're setting charges to control the collapse. Amin, I want that frequency data within 5 minutes. If this works, we reinforce the vault. If it doesn't... The ground beneath them gave another violent tremor, and the tendrils coiled higher into the sky. We're out of time. The ground convulsed beneath their boots, cracks snaking outward like veins, radiating from the fissure that now pulsed with an unnatural glow. Marko braced himself, scanning the battlefield as chaos threatened to unravel their plan before it even began. The tendrils in the distance twisted higher, the air itself growing thick with charged particles, making the fine hairs on his arms stand on end. Time was collapsing around them. Harrow, status on the charges? Marko barked, his voice slicing through the cacophony of shifting earth. The lieutenant crouched near the set coordinates, adjusting the detonation controls with practiced precision. Charges placed, angled for a directed collapse. If we fire now, it should divert the energy surge away from the ship, but it's a one-shot deal. If we get it wrong, we'll be the ones buried. Dr. Amin, still working at his console near the Vanguard, barely looked up. We need a few more minutes. The crystal's data is nearly mapped. Once we identify the stabilizing frequency, we can counteract the breach. Marko ground his teeth. We don't have a few minutes. That thing is accelerating. His gaze flicked to the writhing darkness clawing toward the sky. He turned toward the Guardian, still standing motionless near the fissure's edge. If we detonate, will it be enough to stop this? The Guardian's form wavered, light bending unnaturally around it. Containment is possible, but only with the correct resonance. The key alone is not sufficient. You must reinforce the barrier. Marko exhaled sharply, mind racing. Amin, can we use the Vanguard's harmonic stabilizers to amplify the crystal's frequency? Amin's fingers flew over his screen. Yes, but the ship's transmitters weren't designed for this. I'll need to reroute auxiliary power, and we'll have to synchronize the frequency with the charges. If we mistime the detonation, the whole sequence collapses. Marko turned to Harrow. Trigger the charges the second the frequency stabilizes. We reinforce the vault, then seal it permanently. Harrow gave a sharp nod, setting the detonator to a manual override. I'll give you a 10-second window. Any longer, and we risk a secondary collapse. Marko activated his communicator. All units, brace for seismic impact. We're initiating containment. Amin's voice cut through the tension. Frequency locked in. Stand by for transmission. The Vanguard's external speakers groaned as the stabilizing wave rippled outward, a low vibration that sent dust cascading from the fractured stones. The fissure beneath them bucked violently, the tendrils lashing in agony as the containment field took hold. Now! Marko shouted. Harrow hit the detonator. The charges erupted in a controlled explosion, sending shockwaves rippling through the land. The ground beneath the tendrils caved inward, collapsing the passageway below. A final piercing wail, something ancient and furious, echoed through the landscape before being swallowed whole. The air stilled. The crystal dimmed. The Guardian turned to Marko, its expression unreadable. The vault holds, it said, for now. The final tremors faded, leaving a silence so absolute it pressed against their ears. The fissure had sealed, the land folded upon itself as though the nightmare had never clawed its way free. The crystal in Amin's hands flickered once, then dimmed entirely, its energy spent, its purpose fulfilled. And yet the weight in the air remained, a presence that had been suppressed, not erased. Marko's breathing slowed as he took in the aftermath. Dust hung in the early morning light, illuminated in golden beams that cut through the clearing. The Guardian stood motionless, watching, its form shimmering like heat rising from scorched ground. "It is done," it said, its voice carrying none of the finality Marko had hoped for. "The vault holds," Marko corrected, "for now." His hands curled into fists, the aftershock of adrenaline still running its course through his veins. "Tell me the truth. This was never about keeping something locked inside, was it?" The Guardian's head tilted slightly. "You understand more than most. It is not about what is imprisoned." A pause, then. "It is about who ensures the prison remains closed." Marko felt the meaning settle into his bones. It had never been about the key, never been about the seal. It had always been about the ones left standing when all others fell. His people, his world. The warnings, the ruins, the desperate pleas of long-dead civilizations, they had all led to this singular truth. "We were never the threat," Marko murmured. "We were the fail-safe." The Guardian studied him for a long moment, then inclined its head. "Why us?" Harrow spoke at last, his voice raw. "Why did every civilization before us fail?" The air seemed to shudder, though nothing moved. "Because they could not accept the burden," the Guardian said. "They sought to conquer it, to control it, to reason with it." Its dark eyes flickered, the first sign of something almost human within them. "But humanity, you endure, not because of strength, not because of wisdom, but because when you stand at the edge of annihilation, you do not look away." Marko exhaled, his chest tight. The finality of it burned more than the battle itself. They had inherited a duty older than their species. Every warning left behind had been a plea, not of fear, but of regret. He turned to his crew, their faces lit by the morning sun, marked by exhaustion, but unbowed. "No one else is coming to fix this," he said. "No gods, no saviors, just us." Amin tightened his grip on the inert crystal. "Then we hold the line." Marko met the Guardian's gaze once more. "If they come again?" The Guardian's voice was softer now, almost reverent. "Then the universe will remember why they fear Earth." Marko turned toward the ship, the weight of 1,000 dead civilizations pressing against his back. "Let them come." The Vanguard loomed ahead, its hull reflecting the morning light, a silent sentinel against the ruin-streaked landscape. The earth beneath them was still now, sealed but not forgotten, a scar hidden beneath the surface. Marko took one last look at the Guardian, its form shimmering like a mirage, neither wholly there nor entirely absent. "You understand what you've taken on," the Guardian said, its tone devoid of doubt. Marko nodded, the truth sitting heavy in his chest. "It was never a choice, was it?" "No," the Guardian admitted, "but only one species has ever understood that." A gust of wind swept through the clearing, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant rain. The symbols burned into the ground had begun to fade, their purpose fulfilled, for now. But the knowledge would remain, imprinted in the minds of the few who had seen the truth. Harrow exhaled sharply, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off the weight of the moment. "So that's it? We just keep watch?" Marko glanced at the horizon, where the tendrils of darkness had once writhed, now banished beneath layers of stone and time. "Not just watch," he said. "Prepare." Dr. Amin secured the crystal within the containment unit, locking it with a finality that sent a quiet pulse through the air. "There will be others," he murmured. "Other civilizations. Other threats." Marko turned, walking toward the ship, his footsteps steady against the uneven ground. "Then we make sure they find nothing but silence when they come looking." The Guardian watched them ascend the ramp, its expression unreadable, yet something lingered in its stance, acknowledgement, perhaps even respect. "You are the last," it said, voice carrying like a whisper through the air. "And the first." The weight of those words settled over them as the airlock sealed behind them. Inside, the ship was a cocoon of quiet efficiency, the glow of consoles casting long shadows. Marko made his way to the command deck, watching as the planet receded in the viewport. Amin stood at his side, gaze distant. "All those warnings," he said, barely above a whisper. "Every civilization that fell. They weren't afraid of Earth, were they?" Marko shook his head, his grip tightening on the railing. "No," he said. "They were afraid of what we guard." Silence stretched between them, thick with understanding. Then Harrow, standing at the weapons console, let out a quiet chuckle. "Well," he muttered, "guess that makes us the most feared babysitters in the universe." Marko let the moment settle before speaking. "And if they come knocking again?" Harrow tapped the targeting systems, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Then we remind them why no one makes it past the gate." Outside, the void stretched infinite and indifferent, but Earth remained, nestled within its fragile orbit, a world that was not just home, but the last line between order and oblivion, and the universe would never forget why.